8:30, we'll call the February 16th meeting of the Sherburne County EDA to order. I'd be looking for, well, before we approve the February 16th agenda, we do have a change. Number 5, Jared will not be with us today due to a family issue, so I believe Andy's gonna fill in with some housing or mortgage topics for number 5, correct?
Correct.
Any other changes to the agenda? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And you were all forwarded the January 26th, meeting minutes. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make the motion.
Reverse order, motion,
I'll second.
and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed. All right, we have, Laura here. Are you gonna set her up, Dan, or are we just gonna let her loose?
We're gonna let her loose. Yeah, we all know Laura, and she's gonna talk a little bit about broadband. We do have a map, Laura, that of the ARPA project, so we're gonna bring that up.
Well, I think, to first start out, I don't want to bore everybody with the conversation. So does everyone understand what fiber is and maybe the difference between copper, coax, and what fiber really is? Everybody know the difference? Or?
Fiber, all those glass things in a tube.
Yep. Yep. And then, it's just the reliability, the faster speeds, all of those things that go along with it, more security, can travel farther distance. So I think, we all have phone lines or copper, coax, DSL, available to most everybody in the area to us. But it's just looking for that reliability and the faster speeds is what everybody's looking for. So, if you need to run a speed test, that's really kind of how you determine you can know right away if you run a speed test. If you're getting a higher upload speed, fiber's the only, right now the only way you can get that higher upload speed. Usually the dial-up speed, the smaller coax copper, typically you'll see, lower upload speeds, and you can tell right away. And if it's not real consistent, fiber, is what everybody's after. The businesses, we started working with them back in 2014. State of Minnesota recognized, the need for businesses. And so, they started out a Minnesota border-to-border grant program, which was huge. We're one of the leading states in the whole United States, with a great program. And what they did is they, decided that, they've got a lot of large nationwide providers, like a CenturyLink or Windstream or, big companies that have lots of places across the United States to try to upgrade their facilities. Thank you. And they just don't have the time, resources, things like that. So they tried to put together this grant program to help the new or existing providers in that area with more money to invest in that broadband. So before, costs have gone up, of course, the last year or two, but it's about $60,000 a mile is what we figure to bring fiber down the road. And, the cost for a drop can be significant depending on how far of a drop off the main way we have to come. So, for us to do a couple $100 house project easily, creeps up to a couple million right away, just depending on how far you have to come and, all of the infrastructure you have to put in, things like that. So the state of Minnesota, decided to come up with a program to help providers, whether they were, like I said, they could be existing in the area or if a new provider wanted to come in and provide that infrastructure. So we applied for the very first one. We worked with Sherburne County and we did one for Becker. The Becker Industrial Park, a lot of the businesses in there were trying to run their businesses with 10 meg download and one meg upload. They were, in the 100Ks. And that was, less than 10 years ago. So, it's been, a struggle. Some of the bigger providers just, looked at rural areas, like Sherburne County is a lot of time, just said there's not enough business there for them to support it because it costs so much. And you can look, 20-year payback, who's gonna do that? There's just not a good business model. So I think, when the border-to-border grant started, that was what their goal was, to first get to the businesses, to try to provide that where there was a lack of broadband or, a better speed. And so the FCC, if you look at that map that Dan has up there, there's lots of pink and lots of blue. And what they do is they decide what is considered served. So a served connection has to be, more than 100 meg by 20. So 100 meg download and 20 meg upload is what they're considering that. So if you look at some of those areas up there, the unserved locations are getting less than 25 meg down and 3 meg up. And so the next one then is the underserved, and that one, they're saying that you get less than 100 meg down and less than 20 meg up. And so that's the state broadband goal by 2026, is for all Minnesotans across the state to be able to have access to that 100 by 20. And I think, you can accomplish that with DSL. There are providers that, can do that off of their systems, that they can do that. But fiber's the one, that's gonna have the longevity. It's gonna last, that 50 years where, copper 5, type of thing. So I think, from an investment, if you're gonna put in all new infrastructure, why would you not put fiber in? And so I think that's been our philosophy. Our company, we've done that now. We've done nothing but fiber in the, in this whole area ever since we started. And so I think, just understanding that, we've tried to be a good partner with the communities that we worked with. And I think, Sherburne County's been great. We work with the need first. We had, like Becker was the first one that reached out and said, we just can't do our businesses, we're gonna have to leave. And so we brought, that was our first project, and we did that in 2015. And we were able to bring fiber to that industrial park, and the businesses were all on board and super happy, and
None of them left.
and none of them left.
Laura, can I ask a question? So the mapping, this is still a self-reported map by the providers, correct? Or can we rely on this as being more accurate than what they were in the past?
They're working on it. It's gotten better. When it first started out, what a census tract is. And so that was, good or bad, the way the providers reported it. We have to file a report every year. It's called a 477. We have to, say what everything that we've done this past year, like what our goals, what our speeds are. Let's say this is your block. Your house is right here. And it, without fiber, the old traditional copper coax, there's a pedestal or a fiber node here. Well, it kind of works like water pressure. I think I've explained this before. That this house right here, if that fiber node maybe, does 100 by 20, well, the house closest to it probably does get that. But if there's 20, 30, 40, 50 houses going out throughout that subdivision or area that's served from that node, then what happens, it's like water pressure. So the more people that hop on, the person at the very end might not have anything, or it's really slow speed, and it's just really inconsistent. And I think, that's the part when the FCC had us reporting, you only had to report for that area. So you could say, yep, I have a node there that's 100 by 20, so that's considered served. Well, you talk to the 50th house at the end saying, baloney, I don't have, I have nowhere near 100 by 20. And so I think that was hard, because when we were first doing these projects, we had submitted another grant, for another area, and the provider that was there was a nationwide provider, and they said, nope, we serve that area. And, again, it was 50 houses, and the end people had nothing, there was nothing left for capacity. So I think, they've gotten better. There is a lot of communities shared this, and I know that the Office of Broadband was sharing it a lot, but there is the FCC is asking for people to go on to their map. So it's fcc.gov, I think we have the link if we wanna send it out. And you can look at it and you can see, put your address and say, what does that provide, who your provider choices are, what that provider says they're providing. And we've had communities say, that's not true, and they have updated, they changed the maps about 6 months ago or so. They updated a bunch and said,
October,
I'm sorry,
October.
yeah, October, so.
So you can self-report to correct that
You
map.
can go on there now and you can dispute it or say what the speeds really, you're truly getting. And, it's hard, there's speed tests you can run and things like that, but I think that's the most important part is we can't use grant money for anything that is considered served. So, that
So
really
these maps are important.
the maps are very important, especially if you're in one of those areas that, says it's served, you're stuck. We, as a provider, we can come in, and I have done projects like that, where we were maybe just outside of a community, that we did a fiber to the home project, but that area was considered served, but we went down, Highway 10 for a portion of that road. Well, now we have the fiber mainline infrastructure there, so it's not as expensive, so we are able to work sometimes with the business or the homeowners to try to bring them fiber to their home. So, we just can't use grant money to get to that.
Right.
But, so you might have to sign a 3-year contract or something like that, because I have to, if it costs me 10 grand to bring it to you, we have to recoup those costs and make sure you're gonna stay a customer then for that duration until we get to.
Now, what do we do about the pressure that seems to be coming? We all started out that fiber was the gold standard of where we wanted to get. It was actually gonna be the most reliable, like you said, the most long-term. Now we also have wireless coming in. And a lot of people are saying, well, we can do this a whole lot cheaper than what we can do with the fiber. And I'm concerned that that's going to rise above what we want to actually get in the ground. So can you because people ask, what's the difference? What is the difference between wireless and fiber?
Well, you're talking to a person, I personally have fixed wireless at my home because I am the back 40 of a very long driveway. And, just from that perspective, if you've got the tower in the area that you can get that, there's nowadays you can do wireless hotspots, things like that. But a lot of those providers data cap you, they might limit how much you can use off of those hotspots. The ping and the latency, those are things like how fast does it take to get back and forth to the internet. Sometimes you don't always have that with the fixed wireless or the wireless technology, just because of the way it's, running fibers in the ground, it's that reliability,
How
but
safe is it when it goes through the airwaves as versus
yeah,
not really?
my husband's been doing this since 1987. He's not dead. He doesn't know. I've heard, you hear things, but no, I have a tower at my house. And,
No, I don't mean safe wise.
oh, I thought you meant safe. Yeah, no, I don't have any issues with it. So
Not wearing a tinfoil hat.
yeah,
How safe is it when you're when you're sending your information?
for security, fiber's always the best,
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
what I was gonna say.
Yeah, fiber is your most secure. You can't hack it. You can't. It's
Okay.
a lot harder to get into. So for sure, that's why you'll hear the data centers and
Well,
places
not
like
safe, yeah.
they don't even want aerial. They want in the ground fiber. They don't even want to have anything. They just need that reliability. So
Those banks wouldn't want it running around through the airwaves either.
yep, no, for sure. Yep, there's more secure. But I think fixed wireless has its time and place. In some places it is the most cost effective. Is it the best? No. But, some places just don't have that option, So,
Thanks, sorry to interrupt.
yep, no worries. So
Would RBIG ever entertain the fixed wireless market?
we do have,
We do.
My husband and I used to own our own company and we sold it to RBIG and they do still operate. They don't have as many as we used to have, just because of maybe we had already fiber in the ground, in some of those locations. But no, they still operate it today. We have it in another market down in southern Minnesota as well. So again, if you've got the infrastructure, it's just nowadays, the towers, like everything else, is being consolidated. A lot of them are big companies. They want that high rent rate, you know, and trying to run a business, you know, to get 100 or 200 customers when you have to sit and pay how much money for these tower costs, you know, so, but there's, you know, local ones still, or the state of Minnesota, or places you can try to rent from that at a cheaper rate, but that cost is driving it. And then a couple of years ago, a year and a half or two, the FCC came out and we're changing a bunch of the spectrum. So there's unlicensed and there's licensed spectrum. And so that kind of messed up a bunch of providers that were providing fixed wireless. They made us change out all the radios, which we had to change out all of the stuff on all the homes. And it's just, again, not that cost effective that way, because it's out of your control, things that you can. Where fiber, once you put it in, you really don't ever hear from a customer. You know, it's just that reliable and everybody loves it. So long game is always fiber, I think, if you can afford it and it's a good, you know, good plan to go forward. So.
And just a question, can you use the border-to-border broadband money for
They have,
wireless?
yes, they have supported projects for that in the past. You know, typically we don't apply for anything but fiber. You know, that every provider has their own, you know, business plans to manual. But, you know, especially nowadays with all the money that's available, why wouldn't you put the fiber in? It's gonna be long term. But no, you still see some projects. Some of them didn't get funded last year, but they picked the fiber ones. I'm not sure why. And there's satellite, you know, too. There's those options. There's your hotspot. But again, I think, you know, we do a lot of the fiber to big customers, and so, you know, they do have that reliability. Now, in the past, we never maybe had fiber to towers, you know, the Verizons and the AT&Ts and Sprint or T-Mobile, you know, they didn't have that to every single tower, where nowadays you'll see that more and more. So that's why you're getting the more reliability and the faster speeds off your hotspots that you weren't able to get before.
When you look at our map for Sherburne County, do you think that we're going to achieve that by 2026 goal?
So we just haven't showed it to Dan, but we just did an analysis. So we took from your Sherburne County GIS, we took all of your addresses and we looked at everything that is considered, you know, unserved and underserved. So we threw all the rest out that were considered served. Then we looked at what projects we have in the hopper. So we do have 4 right now, or 3 that we're working on. And I know some other providers have some projects in the area too. So once you take that out, we're getting pretty close. A few of the townships have reached out and asked us specifically how it's looking, and I think we have one township for less than 50 addresses. So it's gonna depend. The state of Minnesota recognizes that. That's, you know, you might have one house, you know, that's sitting out on a 40 or 80 acre piece and there's no one else around you. And so there is another program that I wanted to tell you guys about. It's open for a couple more months yet. It's called the Line Extension Program. So let's say this happens all the time. We do a project and we brought it to, you know, a development or house. Well, there was maybe a side street with 1 or 2 houses and we didn't bring it to them. Well, the way the grant program works, you get scored by how much it costs to bring it per passing and how many houses you're gonna serve and underserve, you know, how many homes you're gonna, passings you're gonna hit. Well, sometimes, you know, if it's an extra $50,000 for us to come out to bring it to one house, financially, it's gonna hurt our project. And so the state of Minnesota recognizes that, and they started a line extension program. And so the homeowner has to do it. You have to go online to their website, you can apply. And if you know that there's fiber, you know, like a mile or less than a mile away, you can go in and say, I want fiber. You know, maybe that provider did a project and they weren't able to bring it to you because it financially just didn't make sense. And so you can apply for that now. And you can put your address in and say, I would like, you know, a proposal to bring fiber. So then they're gonna open up a grant round or, you know, whatever, and then they're gonna award it, or providers can apply and say, okay, we wanna apply to, you know, bring that money, and they're gonna, you know, grant money towards that project. I don't remember how much off the top of my head, how many millions of dollars they put in it, but it's 25, 30 million, something like that. So it could be a good good thing for, like I said, some of the rural areas where maybe that's what happened to you, so.
Yeah, that's good to know because we did have a meeting with a large group of farmers in the county that they expressed that as one of their concerns, that they need better broadband for doing their business.
Nope, and I think Dan does a great job, he has lots of people that reach out to him and say, what about me in my area, we have really bad internet, we need it. And, he'll reach out to us, and if we look at it and say, no, we're more than 2 miles away, check with, another provider, because we all kind of know each other's, what we have in the ground and where it's at. And so, a lot of times we just say, nope, it's better for this other provider to go and do it. And unfortunately, you just don't see that from the nationwide providers. You're probably looking at more of a local provider type of scenario where, we're based just here in the state of Minnesota. We have employees that live and work in the community. We know, we know where every, all of that stuff is, where we get the requests, so.
And Rayanne,
This is Andrew Hulse. Can I ask a question real quick? Can you hear me?
yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So my question is, are there some, we're talking about fiber, but I'm just wondering, are there some areas that might be more cost effectively served from something like Starlink? And you divide up the map and look at what's the most cost effective solution. And, most of it would be fiber, but some portion of it in the most remote areas might be more appropriate for something like Starlink.
I think if you look at the line extension program, I think that was supposed to complement some of those type of scenarios. Starlink, a lot of customers, like you said, if they don't have any other options right now, but you have to realize you have to pay for the upfront equipment. They don't come out and install it, they send it to you, so the person has to find somebody to install it for them. So a lot of people, they don't have those resources to do that. So, it's a nice thing for people if they don't have any other choices, but I would say, always refer to fiber's the best if you can get it. If you can get that, it's long-term, it's gonna last you, 50 years, so I guess that's my answer, that in most cases, take a look at the line extension program, if there is something out there, or reach out to, your community and see if there's something that they can work with a provider to try to do a project. I think with all of the money, right now the state of Minnesota, they figure 2 more years that they'll do this broadband grant program. We have applications open right now. There's another one that's due March 3rd, 2nd, and then the next year there'll be, hopefully another 240 million or something like that. But then there also going to be federal money that is going to be available. Right now, there's been USDA does, reconnect grants, which, our company has received. But now there's going to be the federal dollars, the BEAD grant, and they're talking Minnesota could be getting an additional $400 to $600 million. We're guaranteed 100. So the state, has kind of looked at all of the rest of the addresses in the whole state that are considered unserved or underserved, and they've come up with a dollar amount that they think we could finish everything with fiber if we needed to, or with projects. So, they're calculating things out, but, I think the Office of Broadband has a governor's task force, and they are gonna be dissolving in the next couple months. They're only gonna have a couple more meetings because they truly feel with all of this money that's out there that we're gonna be able to serve every single Minnesotan.
One thing I think you have to be cautious of is whenever there's a lot of money that comes into play, you're gonna get a lot of people that are gonna come in and try to provide you something. And you gotta make sure, and people just don't have a great understanding, of course, of what it is. Because there was a lot of companies that popped up when this first started happening. And they were, they're again, that LLC behind them. They were there to get that fast money, and then they weren't there.
To get the grant money from the state of Minnesota, you have to be eligible, so there is a process, yeah. So they have done a really great job, I think, of trying to
Close that door.
correct, yeah.
There was some issues with RDOF
Correct.
where they just didn't have the capacity to do the projects they were promised that they could do.
And there was probably, you know, before that, before even this last RDOF auction, there were some other providers that, you know, applied for things. They never did the projects and, you know, those were never completed either. So this isn't the first time something like that's happened. But I think, you know, with the state of Minnesota, I have heard of, you know, one other story. I know I sit on a lot of the meetings and listen, and there have been some other major providers that maybe ran into unexpected costs and they didn't finish the project for whatever reason. So I think, you know, the state of Minnesota watches that pretty close. They're not gonna give them another grant, you know, type of scenario. So, but I mean, I think everybody that applies right now has been good. But we have, we've done Becker, we've done Big Lake, we've done what we call the St. Cloud Airport project. We did one in Palmer. We did another one on County Road 8 and Highway 25. We did another grant. We did a couple hundred homes there. We have currently one in Elk River right now. It's both businesses and residential. When we reached out with that program, the city of Elk River started getting calls in, I think, Sherburne County. Why was I not included in that? So we worked with them and we opened up, when the grant opened last year, we opened another one and we did include those homes now.
Yeah, those are the circled areas in Elk River that you see on the map.
So I think, you know, that's the nice part, you know, when these things come up between, you know, us and the county or the city, we don't know every single area. You know, we try our best to recognize that, but I think, you know, you guys as constituents and people that live here, you have to tell us. You know, we don't know that unless somebody tells us sometimes. You know, it's pretty easy to assume, you know, maybe it's a you know, nationwide provider that we know doesn't have fiber in the ground, that area is probably not being served, but, you know, without knowing for sure, you know, and the maps, they try to be as accurate as they can, but that's kind of what we do is we just look at it and say, well, I wonder how this area is, and we try to reach out to somebody in that area to say, how is your internet speed? You know, if we were to bring fiber, but we try to work off of our existing infrastructure. We don't, you know, we're not gonna go pick a community that's 10 miles away or something like that.
I was just gonna, how much dark fiber is not being utilized in the county?
Our rig ourselves, we have 15,000 miles of fiber throughout the state. And, you know, we do over 350 schools. I know we have quite a few towers and things like that. When we first put it in, you know, if you even look back 5 years ago, a lot of residential people really didn't want fiber. You know, we were doing a lot of these projects and, you know, but there's things you can do nowadays with that. You know, those little pop cabinets that you see on the side of the road, you know, those, you can put those in, and if we can get into that and splice the fiber and get into, you know, maybe there was a 2-mile stretch and there's no handhold for us to access it. You know, we've been able to do that now. We've been grooming or upgrading some of our stuff, and other providers are doing that as well.
So other providers are being helpful, and I'm particularly talking about where I know there's a lot of probably underutilized fiber in the city of Big Lake and that area.
You know,
Is that company being a little more open to allowing those opportunities?
Speaking in code, Ray.
I know, right?
Yeah,
I think we all know what company I'm talking about.
we work with a lot of providers, so I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I think.
That's such a good answer.
So,
Okay,
yeah, we do what we can. If we can reach
so,
out.
but there is a good amount of fiber that is already in the ground that probably is being underutilized.
There probably is. Okay. And, you know, there's affordability, connectivity programs too. You know, I think Sherburne County, we're an exception. You know, there's other counties that I work with that probably utilize that program a little bit more. So if there are, you know, households that can't, you know, afford the internet, you can apply for those programs. Usually if they're on a free or reduced lunch program, you qualify. So we're also a participant in that. So I think most of the major, you know, providers do that nowadays. So we try to give those programs as much as we can.
So are you saying we don't utilize it because we don't need it, or we just haven't
I don't
tapped
see,
into it?
you know, we see the reports. I just don't, I think Sherburne County probably from an income perspective probably don't have a lot of people that qualify for it, but we do in some of our other areas. You know, we do see a lot more people signing up for that program.
And you check that by looking at the reduced and free lunch.
Well,
situation
usually if
out of
somebody
the school.
asks me, usually that's kind of about, you know, but there's a link on our website, and most providers have that. You can to go on there. I don't know what the income is off the top of my head, but you can look on there and see if you know somebody that might need that program, they might qualify for it.
Great.
One last thing, Ken, I just want to point out that all these circled areas, it's about 1,000 homes that will be reached through these programs, and that's all ARPA dollars, so it's no local levy dollars. And I wish we could show this map from 2016, because it'll look completely different. We've made a lot of progress in those 6-7 years.
Yeah, I do know that broadband's been a priority, and I think, just from the outside looking in, I think everybody involved's done a pretty fantastic job here to push that through, so.
We went from what ranking in the state?
49th, now we're in the teens.
Yeah, so good progress.
And I think the other thing too, with the county's been really creative. We've tried to, you know, when they're doing a road project, if there's a need for us to put fiber in the ground, you know, not only will it save us, you know, 30-40% off of our construction costs to do that project, which that might be the difference. You know, if we would have applied for a grant, we ask for 40%. So if we can be creative and do some of those kind of things, and I think, you know, Andrew Witter came from that kind of area where their county, it has good fiber and good, because they started that early on. You know, you still have counties today that don't want to do that kind of stuff, but I think, you know, as a homeowner, you can understand if they're doing a road project and coming through, why would we not put conduit in the ground so we can place fiber, you know, for a project? And then we don't have to come back and rip your house, you know, rip it all back up again to do it again. So I think, you know, Sherburne County's done a really good job of trying to think outside the box of how can we, not just from the grant program, are there other things that we can be doing? So we try to partner where it makes sense, so.
Great. Any other questions for Laura? Left? Definitely don't want to cut you off.
Nope.
All right, well then, we'll go to Andy, who's filling in with Jared with some fun facts about mortgages and housing.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of go through, so, just so everybody knows, every quarter, all banks have to file what's called a call report, which basically makes our financials public. Anybody can actually go onto the FFIEC website and pull down the financials of all banking institutions. And we work with a company that will compile every single financial institution in the United States. And then at the end of every quarter, they send us kind of a recap of what's going on. And I thought this was kind of interesting, so I sent this over to Dan when I got it. The first one here is you'll see the total assets, and you can kind of see from quarter one of 2020 until 22, the growth at the financial institutions. And when I say financial institutions, this is just banks. Credit unions do not file call reports, so this is just banking data. So you'll see the growth in there of about 20 trillion down up to 23 trillion is where it's at now. If you go down,
Is this in the state of Minnesota?
this
or
is the country. This is all banks in the country. This is the one where you're kind of seeing what's going on in the marketplace right now. So core deposits. Core deposits are defined as DDA, checking accounts, savings accounts, and CDs, or certificates of deposit, under 250,000. And there was about, you'll see there the growth. So during the pandemic, all financial institutions, our deposit accounts grew quite a bit. And you're seeing that come down a little bit right now. There was actually a $308 billion drop in core deposits. Part of that is people spending money. Other parts of it is investing elsewhere. If you go to the next slide, kind of shows, stop right there. So one of the things that this individual that was sending says, you know, moving money out of banks into short-term treasuries. One of the things is the treasuries have really, really made it easy for the direct consumer to buy bonds. You know, back in the day, you had to go get if you wanted to get like a EE bond or an I-series bond, the inflation bond, you actually had to go get the paper bonds. And now with the website they have, anybody that has an account can just with 2 clicks of a button, buy a treasury or buy a bond. To give kind of an idea, last year when the inflation was going so high, the I-series bond, which is the inflation protection, the inflation bond, was paying out a rate of about 9.62%. And that gets redone every 6 months. And that rate is adjusted every November and every April. So in October, it was 9.68%. In November, it went to 6.84%. In that month of November, there was about $30 billion of people buying treasuries online. And even today, the treasuries, so a lot of people look at CDs, but the treasuries are what's really pushing, because for the state of Minnesota, you don't pay state taxes on the treasuries. And I was just looking, so a 6-month treasury and a 1-year treasury right now are paying about 5%. So when you take a look at your pre-tax yield on that, you're probably about 5.5% for a 1-year treasury. So a lot of people have been moving money into there. Scroll down a little bit. What do we got in the next one? This is just kind of so loans grew, you know, quarter over quarter about $215 billion. You'll see on there the OREO actually came down. So a lot of the people paying their bills. I can say for our financial institution, every Monday we go over all loans that are past nine days or more past due. And in the 14 years I've been at the bank, I have never ever seen it so low. Usually, you know, you're gonna find some of these borrowers that will run that grace period, so they'll go up to 15 days, and our past due list will be, you know, and there's probably about an inch on there for each client, each loan. We'd be 3-4 pages, and now we're down to, I think we had 4 loans on Monday that were over 9 days past due, but none of them were over 30 days past due. Where a lot of the financial institutions are seeing a big crunch is when we had that run in deposits from 2000, quarter 2 of 2000 until now. You know, there was nowhere for banks to put their investments. Interest rates were very low. Commercial loans were in the high 3s, low 4s. You know, the secondary market loans were taken, so that doesn't really count for what we hold on our books. And treasuries were very, very low. I mean, we can't go and invest in anything that's not accredited. So a lot of, you know, mortgage-backed securities or the treasuries is where a bank will put it. So a lot of the mortgage-backed securities is where they're buying, and bank will buy a pool of money that was like the Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae transactions. Well, you're buying those out there at a 10, maybe even a 15-year rate where you're gonna have that investment out there. What's happened with the rates jumping so fast, those treasuries are now all experiencing an unrealized loss. So these financial institutions that may have put money into a treasury, and we'll just use an example of the 10-year treasury. So in January 1st of 2021, a 10-year treasury paid about 0.93%. And yesterday, the 10-year treasury was 3.94%, so it's went up 3%. Well, if you invested, let's just say $10 million into a treasury, a 10-year treasury in January 1st of 2021, well, you can understand that that treasury has lost value if you're holding it available for sale, because no one's going to want to buy a treasury that you have for 0.9% when they can go onto the open market right now and buy it for 3.9. So you're seeing a lot of the financial institutions are stuck with their investments. They cannot liquidate the investments because right now it's all an unrealized loss. As soon as they sell that, then you have a realized loss. It's no different than any of us that were to buy stocks and the stock dips. It's an unrealized loss until you sell it. Well, with banks, the liquidity is selling those treasuries. And if they can't sell those treasuries, they're going to have to find other means to create liquidity in the financial institution. So what's happening, and you're seeing it now, you'll see a lot of these financial institutions, credit unions, and banks are running these special CD rates. Now, the rates on those things have skyrocketed so fast. In the central, so up in by Long Prairie area, Todd County, or even Stearns County, some of these banks and credit unions are running specials of like a 9-month CD at 4%, or a 11-month at 4.5%, maybe an 18-month at 5%. And the reason they're doing that is because they have to create liquidity. They have to get the cash in the bank, because if they're forced to sell this, then they're gonna start to realize financial losses. And right now, it's just a game of people moving cash from one place to another to create that liquidity.
So Andy, just a quick question in regards to that would the person who would be doing that be taking a risk, because or is that still backed by the,
Depends on the amount.
okay.
So if it's under 250,000, it is insured by the
Still
FDIC.
insured, okay.
That's at a bank. Credit unions have their national association, the National Credit Union Association, that will guarantee that. Now, if it's over 250, then there is the risk there, yes. If we scroll down, can kind of see here where the loans have, this is the loans in trillions, how that has jumped up. What I wanted to go to is go down to like here. So in here, you kind of see where that interest rate crunch was. So the interest income, when loans were 3%, you're not making much on interest. But when the Federal Reserve started moving the interest rates, so January of 22, the federal regulators were in our bank, and they were asking why we were not investing as much in treasuries, because we held everything in our Fed funds. So for a bank, think of the Fed funds account as your checking account. We left everything sit in the Fed funds because we could get a better return by loaning that out to businesses and creating relationships than we could with anything else. We were betting on a 25 to 50 basis point increase in 2022. And that's what we were talking with our regulators about. We had no idea that it was gonna jump 4%. And so we were sitting with and just our bank, we were sitting with approximately $150 million in our Fed funds. And the regulators were concerned about our ability to generate income, because with that much sitting at 25 basis points, you're not gonna generate a whole lot. Well, that bet for us paid out tremendous, because as that started moving up, we had, our bank is probably about $550 million, and we had maybe 10 or 15 million in treasuries. So when the rate started jumping, our unrealized losses, the worst we had was 120,000. Some of these banks were 16 million, these community banks, not the bigger ones, the community banks. So that's where, you kind of see a lot of these financial institutions. That's why you see that income shooting up. But what we don't see in this is the interest income is shooting up, but the interest expense is shooting up proportionately with this, because the banks have to hold that money. If we scroll down, this next one here. So here you'll kind of see, so the AFS, available for sale. So when you buy a treasury, from an accounting aspect, you either have to book that as available for sale, which means that I buy a treasury and I can sell that if I need to create liquidity, or I'm gonna hold it to maturity. So if I buy a 3-year, I don't plan on selling that, so I cannot include that in my liquidity plan for the bank. And you'll see here in the billions how much money that has. So Q3 22 was the worst. The available for sale, there was a $321 billion unrealized loss. So if those financial institutions were forced to create liquidity, they would have actually realized that as an actual loss on their income statement. So that's one of the things that we look at. Go down to the 10 largest banks. Keep going down, please. right here. So here's the quarterly asset growth for the 10 largest banks. So the largest bank in the United States right now is JP Morgan Chase. Their quarter on quarter, they went down, what is that, $106 trillion? Bank of America went up a little bit, Citibank went up. When you see Bank of America, Citibank, and Wells Fargo with their quarter over quarter asset growth, that's not because the bank's growing, it's because they're borrowing from the Fed funds. They ran out of money, so they have to actually borrow money to loan out, or borrow money if people want to liquidate their money. Go down. One of the banks on here is Truist. So this is a financial institution that specializes, they're the 6th largest auto dealer. I find this one very interesting because the auto market is typically one of the first markets to trigger some concern in financial institutions. And if you look at this, their Q3 to Q4 delinquency jumped up, what is that, almost $500 million. I think it's $516 million were restructured. 123 million just in this financial institution was in delinquent on auto loans.
And you guys use that as like an indicator of what's to come
Yeah,
across all industries?
yeah, because the typical family, your auto is probably going to be one of the first things that you're going to start missing payments on. You know, it's not going to be the mortgage, the house that you live in, but a lot of these people that went out and bought the vehicles, and that'll be one of the first ones that start to go. And I think too, you know, there was a lot of some financial institutions like this one. So not only is this one of the concerns, but you have some of these financial institutions and credit unions that, if you remember 2 years ago, they were booking auto loans for 2.5, 2.9% rates. Well, when you have a financial institution that's booking all of these auto loans at, call it 3% or 4%, and now they're offering CDs at 4.5%, not only are they in risk with an interest margin aspect that they're flipped on that, they're also, with these delinquencies like that, they're in a double risk. So we take a look at this, and this is kind of one of the leading indicators of kind of what's going to come down the road here. We do a lot of our investments with a company called Raymond James, and we get quarterly updates from them. And even with the Fed Reserve, you know, we're on all of that stuff. And it's appearing to us right now that there's probably going to be at least 1, maybe 2 more rate hikes this year, and then they're going to hold it. And I think the Fed's going to hold it for a period of time, at least through the end of 23, maybe into 24, and then possibly start to decrease a little bit. But with the way that the inflation has spiked in the past 18 months, they're not going to be able to bring that down very quick. So I think we're going to start to see a lot of these delinquencies starting to take a financial toll on a lot of the institutions.
When you start to see this, say in the auto industry, is there any like historical trend data that's going to show you when it starts trickling over into mortgage and other areas? Like how long does that?
Typically what they'll say is 18 months. One of the leading indicators of a recession is what's called a negative yield curve, inverted yield curve. Mm-hmm. And what an inverted yield curve is if you take a look at the 10-year treasury numbers. So the 10-year treasury was, what did I say, 3.94. So 10-year treasury yesterday was 3.81. 7-year treasury was 3.94%. So when you're thinking of your investments and traditional CDs, you should be getting a higher yield the longer you lock that money up. So the 10-year treasury was at 3.81, and the 1-year treasury is at 4.96. So no one's locking their money. Everybody's keeping their money super short. I mean, even a 1-month treasury is paying 4.64%. So you can just kind of see how everything is kept with under a year So whenever that yield curve gets inverted, that your short terms, that's typically the leading indicator that a recession's coming. And once that yield curve inverts, it's typically 18 to 24 months before the recession will hit. So that's kind of one of the things that we're looking at right now. And, you know, with the rates going up this high, you know, the 10-year treasury is what all your secondary mortgage rates are based off of. When the treasury goes up, you're gonna see your interest rates on your 30-year mortgages going up as well. When they come down, you'll see that reverse effect there. So when you go from a point, you know, what, 2021, 0.94 treasury, we were at about 3.5% fixed 30 years, and now we're at 6.5% on that 30 year. So,
You just voted. I know.
you should see the ELCO meeting, the asset liability management meetings that we have at the bank.
Okay.
Is the Truist Bank, is that, what kind of paper do they usually hold it? I mean, some banks will be super conservative, or is this like a good credit, bad credit type thing, or
It's
they have a
it's a
mix?
mixture of everything.
Okay.
But a lot of these banks and the credit unions, when they went through the auto fleet, so they'll have the partnerships with the dealerships. And I think that's where you're gonna start to see a lot of these. The banks that went with the auto loans, and the auto loans are their main ones, are gonna be the ones that hurt a little bit more, because they locked these things up for 7 years. And now all of those investments that they have out there tied up with that is gonna start to feel the pain.
All right, well, thanks for that information. Anything else, any other questions? All right, well then we'll move on to the strategic plan draft review. Jessica?
Do we want to propose that we do this at a future meeting?
Yeah, just give a summary of what you did and then.
Okay, so my plan today was to go through this document as a live review, and just throw comments and notes in on what the group, what your thoughts were either way. Do you want to keep the goals and strategies that I have in there, that's just information that's been collected? What do you want to edit out and things like that? I don't think we have enough time to give adequate attention to this right now. So I'm gonna propose that we save that for the next meeting. But I believe everyone has this document, so my ask would be that through this next month, and I know it's time consuming and probably a little bit of a commitment, but read through it, and so then when we come to the next meeting, you know, I can pop this up and I can plug everyone's comments in as we go, focus area by focus area. And my goal is to get through that in a half hour or less, so. But that's where we're at with the strategic plan. I just really wanna go through it with a fine tooth comb with you guys before we get to our final edit.
Do you want us to send anything to you between now and then, or keep them
If you
until
wanted
our next
to,
meeting?
so, yes, I mean, if you have the time to do that, to write it up and send it to me, I would plug it in as comments on this document, so it's visible to the group at our next meeting.
And you'll be, the presentation that we had yesterday, you'll be sending that information out to
As
us?
soon as I get it from Luke Kemp.
Yep.
And do you anticipate that, the information that was gone through and that we'll go through more thoroughly when we actually get the paperwork will change the strategic plan at all?
The information that Luke presented, I think that's definitely a discussion to be had, yeah. Is that a presentation that you would want to be shared with the entire EDA to go through? Yes?
I think
Okay.
weren't all of us there yesterday from the school?
Was everybody there? Like, is
We're well
everybody-
represented though.
Yes.
Okay.
The members that are missing weren't there, but I think all of us were there. But yeah, we thought it was a great presentation.
And they're on
Yeah.
vacation, so they have a,
Okay.
February's a tough month, a lot of people can't stay.
So I do think that there could be some value to share with the members that are missing, because I do think that, you know, it was a few things yesterday I noted too that I think would be really good to incorporate, maybe we hadn't thought of it in the future.
Yeah, we had Luke come in and present to just the EDA, and he loves to get out, so maybe there's an opportunity to,
You could do a deep dive on it, on any particular subject. Workforce was what he really hammered yesterday, that's gonna be the issue the next 5-10 years.
so we can really figure out how we want to. So maybe you can reach out and see if Luke would be willing to, like I said, he's always saying, contact me and bring me out, I'm more than happy to.
Would workforce be the one and only area that you would like him to expand on, or do we wanna look into childcare?
I think we need.
I think
to talk
housing
to
and
that housing,
childcare were the two that really stuck out, which plays into
the workforce.
the workforce.
Okay.
Which may shift our, those are the two areas that I thought might shift our perception as a 3-year plan as to go away from business as usual, some of the things we view as the EDA to, I mean, he made some pretty strong points about you guys aren't looking in the right spot here. And I think maybe we need to take that into consideration and at least have a discussion and drill on that a little bit more to see if he's right or if there's a balance in there, cause, yeah, we might be looking in the wrong area.
Plus also working to connect with our youth that are coming out of school and what do we do to keep them here and working.
Right.
And I think that all of the things that he said we should be focusing on ahead of chasing those big businesses. If you create that solid foundation, you're gonna create something that would attract something as well, without chasing it.
So I gave Jessica some crap yesterday about that. Hopefully they don't include my kids in the survey. But anyway, as I was leaving and saying my goodbyes from table to table, that was the discussion pretty much everywhere I went, and everybody was pretty excited about that idea. So, you know, there has to be, you know, I'm gonna say it's a great idea. The thing is that something the EDA is going to take on to try to facilitate that survey? Is that a project we need to do, or?
We certainly can, and that's something that could be built into the document is, you know, we want direction from the group. You tell us what's your priority, and based on yesterday, I think that'd be a worthwhile exercise.
Yeah.
And I think maybe you can look at it from the perspective, and I'm just throwing ideas out there, but we have a big focus on business retention and expansion, which is awesome. That's gonna be super important, particularly if we're gonna possibly be seeing a recession that's coming. That's gotta be a huge area of focus. But people retention, and how do we, I mean, is there people retention surveys? I don't know, you know, but we haven't thought of that yet. But what does people retention look like in Sherburne County, and how can the EDA come up with a plan or a strategy or something to ensure that we're keeping our people here?
We have stay interviews for our employees. Maybe we should do that for our employers. Why are you staying here? And that's part of your BR&E survey, but that's more at the corporate level, the executive level, not necessarily at the employee level, but that's something we could look at.
I found it interesting too, that not only you want to keep people here, but you want to create something that is going to draw people here as well.
Build what they want. That was a
basically what he said,
message
yeah.
yesterday. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll anticipate that maybe for next month's meeting? Next month, okay, great.
And I just want to add too, I'm one of those people that thoughts like come to me throughout the month as I'm reading stuff and thinking of things. My email is open all the time. If you're having a thought or an idea and say, hey, put this in for a discussion next month, or maybe throw this as a discussion item on the strategic plan, just shoot me an email and I'll make sure that it gets in there, so you don't gotta try to remember to bring it the next month or however that may be, but.
So if we were to reach out to the schools and they were to come out or whatever, I mean, what do we have as EDA board to offer them to promote, you know, like some type of technical schooling? I mean, we talked a little bit yesterday. Elk River has a little bit, it looks like, but it's not as much.
It's not as robust.
Yeah.
It's big lakes. And we're networkers. That's one of our main goals. So we connect people And that's probably our main role. We can do surveys for them, we can share that information, but we're information gatherers, we're a hub for central marketing, so we connect people, that's our main role, and I think that's where we could connect them with DEED or other programs that are out there that they aren't aware of.
Okay.
And then leave the program development to them. I think an example of that would be on a different scale, but we had, Teresa and I had a BRNE visit at Eastie Enterprises in Big Lake. And one of the things that came of that was they wanted to form a partnership to directly target veterans for employment, but they didn't know how to do that. And then I was just at a chamber meeting where Magnus Veterans Foundation was there, and they were receiving an award and talking about their program. And so I just contacted Magnus, had a meeting with them and see if that was something that they'd be interested in. I talked to Eastie, and then they're kind of just played matchmaker, and they're gonna develop something, a partnership there. So I would envision, you know, whatever we look at with engaging students to look similar that way, just being the dot connector.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions, comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion, second? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries.
Well, Andrew, you have a real nice